ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I don't think there's going to be a lot that Mr. Carr or Mr. Lisowski will agree with me during this argument. But one thing I think they will, unequivocally, and I think I can say this without fear of contradiction, is I want to thank you for your time and your attention to this case. We have been here now almost 2 weeks. Tomorrow would be 2 weeks, except for the 2 Tuesdays. And it's asking a lot of persons like yourselves to come in here, take time away from your career, from your jobs, from your families, and sit on a case, especially one like this, which is so important. But if you remember, on the very first Monday, when you all were out here and we were talking, you know, I brought up Runnymede, the Magna Carta. You're the continuation of that. As jurors, you are the barrier between them and there. Okay? That's how important your job is. And I thank you. I thank you for that. And I think they do too, to be honest with you. Now, I want to go over the jury instructions real quick. You know, we talked about presumption of innocence and reasonable doubt. The presumption of innocence, as you see it there, is verbatim from the jury instructions. And as Jordan Henning sits here right now, he's innocent. Shroud around him, it covers him, and that shroud is called innocence. And he will remain innocent until when or if you decide otherwise. The other major legal principle is reasonable doubt. And I'm not going to go through the jury instructions, but I tried to keep up with His Honor as he was reading these, and I would bet you that you will find the term reasonable doubt at least 12 times during these instructions, if not more. That's how important it is. This is not a car wreck case where you said, well, 51%, they proved their case by 51%, or an incompetency case where they proved their case by a higher level. This is a reasonable doubt case. It always has been, it always will be. It's an important legal concept. And the reason I bring that up is because we talked about juror error when we were questioning you. How many people have seen or read about people who have spent time in prison for a number of years only to find out that they're innocent? And we all agree. We all agree that that's terrible. It's God awful. Okay? And we also agreed that a person should not spend any more time incarcerated, taken away from his family, taken away from society, any more than he should be. We all agree with that, and I don't think they're going to disagree with that. The judge explained to you about, in his definitions there, extreme emotional disturbance. You know, we've never once tried to convince anyone that Mr. Henning suffered from a mental illness. We never did. Our Dr. Anderson told you that. Their Dr. Anderson told you that. But it is a temporary state of mind, so enraged, inflamed, or disturbed as to overcome one's judgment and to cause one to act uncontrollably from the impelling force of the extreme emotional disturbance, rather than from evil or malicious purposes. I want to touch briefly on that, and I'll get to it in more detail later, but we've all seen this horrific video, and it's bad. I agree with that. I wouldn't even ask you to consider it any other way. But we all agreed, our Dr. Anderson There, Dr. Anderson. When you see that, he was in as Mr. Jennings didn't testify to, another zone. Every witness, and we'll go through those in a second, that testified about Jordan Henning, every one, they'd never seen him this way before, ever. You heard it from his neighbors, the wolf pack. You heard it from his commanding officers. Chris Williams, David Vance, the elite of the elite, as far as enlisted men go, had him in his command. And we'll get over what they said later. But you heard them. You heard them. So, now, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Extreme emotional disturbance or reckless homicide is not an excuse or justification for homicide. It never has, and it never will. That's just the way it is. It never has, and it never will. It only distinguishes between the truly evil person, a mobster. You know, so-and-so's a rat, go kill him. Those are evil people. People drug dealers. I give you 5 pounds of cocaine or fentanyl or methamphetamine. You only sold 4, you kept 1. Boom, you cheated me. Boom. You didn't give me all the money that you should have gotten. Boom. Those are evil people. They are people who act with evil and malicious purposes. Jordan Henning did not. Jordan Henning is someone who snapped, and he lost it. We told you on day 1, right up here when we were giving the board out, we told you, this is not a whodunit. There's never been any question about who did it. But it's important for you to think and to realize and to consider why it was done. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? We'll get to that. When Jordan testified, and he took the stand just a couple of days ago, I guess, I think Monday, you saw him. He told you. He ruined lives that day. No question about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And that's why this case is so important. Not because it erases what Jordan did, but it differentiates from what he didn't do, which is intentionally murder Ashley Henning. He did not do that. He didn't wake up that morning and say, well, okay, this is it. This is the day. He didn't do that. And I believe that the evidence, I would submit to you, that the evidence that you've seen and heard in this last week and a half, clearly leads to that he was acting under an extreme emotional disturbance or that he committed reckless homicide. Why do I say that? The judge, in his instructions, has defined recklessly. When he, Jordan Henning, fails to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk, fails to perceive it, that the result will occur or the circumstance exists. And it must be of such nature and degree that the failure to perceive it constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of care. Now, you saw the video, you heard the witnesses. Now, we're going to touch more on that in a little while. There can be no doubt that he failed to perceive a risk. He was in a rage, which had been triggered by events that happened prior to that. Triggered. Or as Dr. Anderson said in response to one of Mr. Egger's questions about how he had reviewed Mr. Jennings' statement to the police. The police took statements, they're transcribed, we get them as part of the court process. He reviewed his statement, but for some reason, he chose to admit that Mr. Jennings had said, man, he was in another zone. A retired military policeman who said he was in another zone. But in any event, I'm going to reiterate what I said. Extreme emotional disturbance or reckless homicide, they do not justify homicide. They never have, and they never will. But let me tell you that's what they do. They're still significant crimes with significant punishments. Make no mistake about it. That's what they are. So let's look at the evidence if we can. The first person I think that testified was across the street neighbor, James Watts. He goes by Jimmy. You remember him. He was a member of the Wolf Pack. Remember that? The Wolf Pack. Him and Bockert, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Jordan, and there may have been a couple of others. He described Mr. Henning, Jordan. When they got together over at each other's houses, fire pits, parties they went to, they had, when he was intoxicated, he was always a happy, giddy drunk.
How is he generally when he's drinking?
Usually it's a lot of fun, funny, friendly. Does get handsy. He likes to put his hands on the back of people's necks and grab my neck multiple times. I thought of it as a playful thing.
They came in here, a year and a half later. Oh, he likes to put his hands on their necks and invade your space. That's what they said. But that's how they knew him. That's how they knew him. Happy, giddy, drunk, put his hands on your neck. Jordan told you where that came from. It came from his grandfather who raised him, who was always, good job, son. It was a sign of affection. And Jimmy Watts even just told you the other day, and right now, he never thought anything about it. Let's tell you who Jimmy Watts is. The guy that doesn't like to hang around with, never liked it, really. There's Jimmy Watts. And I'm referring to Defendant's Exhibit number 9. That's Jimmy Watts, ladies and gentlemen. He talked about the kill list. You know, they wanted to bring out the kill list that Jordan had done. What an outrageous thing. What an outrageous thing. He admitted it was fantastical. It was a joke. He told you that. And I think you all remember that. And the reason we know that he was a good buddy, what you saw, what you heard of Jordan Henning, is because Jimmy Watt, was over at Jordan's house all the time, playing games, borrowing tools. Earlier that afternoon, he borrowed a spanner wrench, so he could work on his own firearm. He would come over on Jordan and Ashley's date nights. I think there was some testimony that he came over on his body that night, and Jordan had cooked some steaks for him and Ashley, and Jordan ended up giving him his steak. Derby party, birthday parties. Jordan was at his house when necessary, helping him with emergencies like, let's get the generator working. Let's bail water out of your basement. Let's cut down some trees because of tornadoes and stuff. So despite everything he tried, despite his best efforts to turn against Jordan Henning from this witness stand, it's all BS. It's poppycock. He kept going over there. He admitted that. Jordan kept coming to his house. He admitted that. And he also admitted, ladies and gentlemen, that when he was over there on June 26, 2023, when he left the home, everything was normal. He had no reason, none, to be concerned about Jordan's safety, Ashley's safety, or any of the kids. He told you that. But after all hell broke loose, and I mean hell, he went over to the house because Carter had run over, and what did Carter say? My parents, plural, my parents need help. When Jimmy arrived, he saw Jordan and Ashley sitting on the steps of the back deck arguing, which is apparently something they did very often. What did he say?
Ran into the backyard. I could hear them as I approached the house. Could hear shouting coming from the backyard. So, being familiar with them and their property, went to the side gate, and they were both sitting on the back deck. They were sitting on the stairs, shouting. They were both there at that time.
And did they notice your presence?
Yes, they acknowledged me, and Jordan told me that I was trespassing and that I needed to leave right then, and this was none of my concern but to leave.
Then for whatever reason, he and Jordan got into a scuffle. You remember that? After this brief scuffle ended, I think he told you, he testified, I know he did. He testified that Jordan had him in a headlock. Maybe this was one of the most important things. He did not see a gun. anywhere prior to him getting up and leaving. How could Jordan have put him in a headlock if he was holding the gun? How could he? He told the police after this deed happens. He's interviewed by the police. This is not his transcript, but they interviewed these. They transcribe them, and we get to see them, and we get to read them. Because that's the American way. That's the American justice system. What did he tell the police? After his scuffle, his and Jordan's, he was no longer a threat to Jordan. Remember, I asked him about it. Based on what you observed at that time, the argument, chasing you around, where you submitted and you were no longer a threat to him, your own words, right?
Yes, sir.
I was no longer a threat. He didn't say I was never a threat. He didn't say I wasn't a threat. He said I no longer was a threat. Then he left, and Jordan told you that he heard Jimmy Watts say, "I'm going to get my gun." Jimmy Watts denies that. But he reluctantly admitted he owned a gun. Jordan knew he owned a gun. They were all part of the wolf pack. Earlier that day, Jimmy Watts had come over to ask to borrow a wrench so he could work on his firearm. Jordan knew he had a gun. That's what he heard. Even Jimmy Watts reluctantly admitted to you all that he owned a gun. Okay, now, do you own a gun?
Yes.
About all I'm going to say about Jimmy Watts. I might come back to him later. The second witness was Jason Bockert. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I think it was Bockert. Another member of the wolf pack. The drinking buddies, the party boys. We know that. He admitted it. Have that on the yes, slide where he admitted he was. Okay, it's all right. He admitted it. He was aware of marital issues between Ashley and Jordan. He told you that.
And then you recall Ashley one time saying at a party, "I'm going home to bed," and the defendant said about going to bed with her. You recall citing that as an example to police?
I do.
And she said, "You ain't going to bed with me, I'm going to go to sleep." You recall that?
Yes, sir.
All right. The fact is that you said they were having marital problems. It was obvious they've been having marital problems. It was obvious they've been having marital problems for years, and that's what you told law enforcement at the time, correct? That's what the transcript shows, and that's what you told them, correct?
Yes, sir.
You know, I got to ask myself, why was that question so hard to answer? It was the truth. Why? Jordan had helped his family many times. They were buddies. They can come in here now, a year and a half later, and say, well, he's a sorry SOB, he's this, he's that. Doesn't make any difference. They kept going over to his house despite all of these perceived personality defects, which they now detest. But they kept going. They were buddies. They were drinking buddies. They were part of the wolf pack. As a matter of fact, I think he testified. I know he did. I'm not to say think. He couldn't understand why there was a party on Ashley's birthday because we all knew she didn't like to celebrate. He wasn't invited. He and his daughter went over uninvited, stayed about a half an hour and left. That's his testimony. And when he left, everything was fine. He had no reason to believe that Ashley was in trouble. None. He also testified that during the incident, Jordan had snapped and was so enraged. As a matter of fact, all the years of their friendship, they're drinking together. They're partying together. If I'm talking too fast, please slow me down. He had never seen Jordan act that way before. Never.
At the prior birthday party for Jordan on Derby Day, there was no outburst, correct?
Correct.
I'll come back to him a little later. I think the next witness was a person by the name of Brandon Savat. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. I'm a country boy from Hardin County. I know Smith, Jones, Rigney, and Ashlock, and Carr. Some of these other names I'm not too familiar with. His wife was a friend of Ashley's. And as a result, he became a friend of Jordan's. He was, at the time, he was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. And Jordan was an E4. But yet they socialized together. They fraternized together. He described what happened when he got over there. They cooked out. He talked to Jordan. They drank. And when he left the home, he had absolutely no reason, none, to believe that anything was not normal and no reason to fear for anyone's safety. You had no concerns about any violence taking place, did you? Everything was just like normal.
Right.
Right? Jamie Savat. I'm going to try to be nice, but how could you forgive her? She was hostile. She was loud. She used liberal profanity and was rude throughout her whole testimony. She was a close friend of Ashley's. Met her through soccer. It was an impromptu birthday party. Everything was fine when they left. Her husband told you that. She told you that. After they left, and until she got home, she didn't call Ashley, hey, are you okay? She didn't send a text message, hey, are you okay? Because she had no reason to believe that anything was amiss. But more importantly, she was pretty proud of the fact that she's a guardian ad litem. Well, a guardian ad litem is someone who works within the court system. They work with police officers. They work with social service agencies. And then she had an interview with a CID. Another one of these transcripts that I showed you. I've got hers, not with me, but She was interviewed by the CID, and she never, ever mentioned that Jordan was a threat to his wife or children. Ever. She says, she tested, is it my job to come forth? Remember how loud and rude she was? Profane? Well, despite working with the police and the court system and her strong personality, she never once believed that this marriage was in trouble or had any reason to believe it, because she knew how to intervene, how to get other people to intervene. As a matter of fact, she even told you that Jordan came to her and said, I need to talk to you about my marriage. She brushed him off. Riley was the next witness, I think. She was in a room with pink eye. Prior to that night, she had never seen any physical violence between her parents, but often heard her parents yelling and verbally fighting with one another. Other than the BB gun, she wasn't even aware that there was a weapon in the home. And then she expressed, well, they were pretty harsh on their discipline. Well, you know, Ashley and Jordan both were military people. I suspect, and I would submit to you, and I think it's a reasonable inference to conclude, that the military discipline in that home is a lot different from the discipline that occurred in her home with her mother when her mother was taken away because of legal problems. And perhaps now where she is. We don't know. But I think it's a reasonable inference. Tried a case once where, well, strike that. Then we had Jason Vance. He was the next witness. I'm going to tell you right now, I've known Jason quite a while. Fine guy, fine detective. I'm not in any way being critical of him or the Radcliffe Police Department or any other police department in this case. But he investigated the case till that night. He had never met Jordan, didn't even know who he was. Certainly had never met Ashley. He knew nothing about them. He admitted to that. And more importantly, all this video that you are no doubt going to see again, when asked, he had to admit that no gun was ever brought into the situation until after Jimmy Watts had been there the first time and then left. And from looking at the video, it'd be fair to say that Mr. Henning did not go get the gun until Mr. Watts left.
Objection.
Well,
Hold on.
why-
Hold on. Mr. Regan, here's what I would say. If you can get somewhere else, I think everybody saw everything, but Mr. Regan, I understand the questioning. Just make sure you get there. Make sure you get there.
well, you saw and heard, you didn't see it, you heard about this altercation on the back porch with Ashley and with Mr. Watts, didn't you, on the tape?
Yes.
Okay. And then, after that, is when you saw Jordan Henning go in and get the gun, correct?
Correct.
No gun was ever introduced. That's uncontradicted. Uncontradicted and even admitted to by the Commonwealth. No gun ever came into this situation until after Jimmy Watts left and said, I'm going to go get my gun. You know, I've gone through this, and I don't mean to bore you, and I hope I'm not boring you, but the important thing to remember from all of those witnesses, who were the Commonwealth's witnesses? Not ours, the Commonwealth's. Jordan was a good guy. They had never seen him act this way before. Not even a violent outburst. You know, I do this. I think most people do. Sometimes you get so frustrated, and as you expletive deleted, expletive deleted, expletive deleted. They didn't even hear that from Jordan, ever. And what happened that night, they all said, was totally out of character for him. Or as Mr. Jennings said, man, he was in another zone. Now that's their case, okay? It's not ours. But all of that is consistent with the testimonies of Sergeant Braxton McCoy, Sergeant Lenore Wright, Command Sergeant Chris Williams. He was soft-spoken. He was willing to help out anybody, other soldiers. And we know that from Jimmy Watts and Jason Bockett, going over, bailing water out of the basement, helping their families. Sergeant Derek Koth. Command Sergeant Major David Bass. You've seen their clips of their testimony. They all testify. They knew him, they worked with him, they commanded him, and his character for honesty and integrity were above reproach. And then even though he was frustrated from time to time, they never saw any violent outbursts from him. No. Right there, never. Let's talk about, that was Jordan Henning. There's no disagreement about that, really. What led to the breakdown? What led to him snapping that night? Well, let's start with a toxic relationship. Braxton McCoy. What kind of marriage did they have, based on what you heard?
Based on what I heard, he's just toxic.
That was their marriage. Oil and water. The marriage itself. They may have loved one another when they first got married. I hope they did. I know Jordan did. But the simple fact of the matter is this. Ashley Henning did not want to go to Fort Drum. She would have done anything to keep him going to Fort Drum. Jordan says nobody wants to go to Fort Drum. So they got married. Drip. Remember that? After they got married, the marriage became a toxic relationship. Braxton McCoy just told you that. It's another drip. Jordan testified that while in Colorado, Ashley kicked him down the steps, concrete steps.
When we were in Colorado, not long after we got married, we got into an argument, and when I tried to leave the house, she had kicked me in the back down our concrete steps. I busted my chin. I went to my NCO's house for the weekend just to let things cool off.
Another drip. Eventually, they ended up at Fort Knox. We know that Jordan was seeking help for his marriage. They went to marriage counseling. They went to a marriage retreat and went to see the chaplain. How many times, we don't know if they went. Another drip. Jordan reached out by himself to other counselors and programs at Fort Knox, only to be ignored by Ashley. Another drip. Eventually, knowing that it's not a good thing in the Army to have to go to your superior commanding majors, discuss your marriage, he mustered up the courage to talk to Command Sergeant David Bass. Now, they were in New Jersey at Fort Dix, and there was some acronym they used. Jordan, had gathered enough confidence from his superiors in his character that he was a driver for the top enlisted man at Fort Knox, the very top. And on occasion, a two-star general. People who are slouchers, who are troublemakers, they don't achieve those positions. I think we can all agree on that. But he went to see Command Sergeant Major Bass and said, I need to talk to you about my marriage.
He called me to ask me if he could come and talk to me. He had a problem. And I said, of course you can come talk to me. So he came to my room, and that is when he let me know that he was having an issue.
Well, don't say what he said.
No, I got you. Understand.
He was concerned about the state of his marriage. Is that fair?
Yes,
Okay. And while he was talking to you, did he receive a phone call?
he did.
And who was it from?
It was from Ashley, his wife.
And did he put the phone on speaker?
He did.
Okay. Don't say what she said. But you heard the conversation.
I did.
Now, the things you heard, were they disturbing to you about what you heard from her?
They were disturbing, yes, sir. She was irate.
He reached out to Wolfpack members, Jimmy Watts and his wife, Brandon and Jamie Savat. I also assume Bacher, but I'm not saying that for sure. His friends, they turned him away. Go see somebody else. He called the Radcliffe Police Department seeking help. Not once, but twice. The first time, I hope this is working, was on January. It doesn't work good on the white apparently, but it was 270-765-5133. That's the Radcliffe Police Department's phone number, non-emergency number. He called on September the 8th, and the phone call lasted 2 minutes and 34 seconds. So there might not have been much of a conversation that night. But look at the day before, on 9/7, he called the same number That phone call lasted 6 minutes and 39 seconds. He told you what kind of response he got. You're a man. You're a soldier. You know, Dr. Anderson, our Dr. Anderson testified that that's the trouble men have when they report domestic violence. So what did he do then? I'm looking at excuse me, I keep saying Commonwealth and I mean our exhibits. Number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. Do you have one of the hand? There you go. That's where she bit him. That's where Ashley bit him. I think that's where she threw a TV remote control at him one night. Hit him. Go to the next two, please. This mark across his chest. The fat lip. She threatened to destroy his career. Remember, she outranked him. She outranked him. She threatened to destroy the career.
She told me she would turn it around on me, and I believed her that she would. Because, yes, I was the lower ranking. She had more support for her chain of command than I did at the time. And again, when Ashley said something, you believed it.
She threatened to take Briley and Carter away from her. From him. Carter, the son I never had. The son I always wanted. The person I bonded with. Taught him how to do things. Worked with him. Briley, his own daughter, who he had never seen until she was taken away from her mother by the authorities in Texas. She was going to take those kids away from him. That's what she threatened. You remember when Command Sergeant Major Bass testified? You saw the clip. She was irate. What did Jordan tell you? I get back from that trip. His personal possessions were destroyed. His personal collectibles were destroyed. His t-shirt collections, you know, his rock bands, Hard Rock Cafe, they were found in a bathtub full of bleach. The motorcycle, she cut the brake line. She cut the brake line on the motorcycle. Damaged the handlebars. And despite all that, he reached out trying to love her, be a husband to her. The lack of intimacy in the marriage, and I'm not talking about sex, okay? I'm talking about thank you, hon, thank you, husband, for being there for me. That kind of stuff. You know, sex is part of it, but I'm not going to let this devolve down to a lack of sex argument, because it was more than that. Lack of intimacy. What did he tell her? I just want you to effing love me and need me and be my partner. Never happened. Never happened. She had no respect for Jordan. Our exhibit number 10. This is his text message to Ashley. My wife doesn't validate me. My wife doesn't respect me. My wife doesn't allow me to make any decision without criticism. My wife doesn't love me or desire me. My wife doesn't allow me to fail in life. My wife wants what she refuses to give. That was their marriage. Sad. Sad, sad, sad. And we'll talk more about that later. You know, on Monday, in his opening statements, Mr. Carr told you that the day before, on June 22nd, severe storms and tornadoes came through Hardin County. He took his family, Jordan, took his family down to the basement for protection. Who would not go? Ashley. He took the kids down there. He went down there. He asked Ashley to come. I'd say he literally begged her to come down there for her safety. She wouldn't come. Then he stayed up all night watching the sump pump because he didn't want to have happen in his basement what his buddy, Mr. Watts, remember the wolf pack, had his, where Jordan was over there helping him bail water out of the basement. Sad situation. Sad. The video. Then you saw the video. I'm not going to make any horrific, terrible, it's god awful. And I don't doubt for a minute that the Commonwealth is not going to play it again. But remember, when we were questioning you during voir dire, you promised me. You promised Jordan Henning. You promised the Commonwealth, and you promised his honor that you were going to listen to all the evidence, not just selected parts. I'm asking you to do that, ladies and gentlemen. But during the video, what does he say to her as he's trying to clean up? Let me serve you. Mr. Lisowski, in his cross-examination of Jordan, asked Jordan, accused him that he would do anything to save his career. Anything. If you think Jordan Henning was in control of his emotions, his rage that night, think about this. How did he think that committing reckless homicide was going to help his career? It wasn't. he was in his right mind and was in control of the situation that night and was not suffering from extreme emotional disturbance, why would he do this in front of the cameras that he helped install? Think about that. The intoxication. They're trying to make a big deal that he was intoxicated. There's no doubt that Jordan and Jimmy Watts and Jordan Bacher and a couple of other people, maybe even Brandon Savat, liked to drink alcohol when they were together. He kept saying this, he's intoxicated, he's intoxicated, he's intoxicated. But you know what we didn't hear? You know what you did not hear? What was his blood alcohol level that night? They never told you. They never put that into evidence, and they never told you, and I'm going to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that they didn't want you to see it. I'm going to tell you that right now. If he was so intoxicated, why didn't they bring in and show you his blood alcohol level? They didn't do it. But on that god-awful tape, that horrific tape, you never saw Jordan Henning staggering. You never saw him slurring his speech or exhibiting any other types or signs of intoxication. It's on the video. As a matter of fact, he was intoxicated. What difference did it make? Everybody that knew Jordan and that drank with him described him as a happy, giddy, happy-go-lucky drunk. Not a mean, not a violent drunk. And I would submit that everybody in this courtroom have seen mean or violent drunks at some point in their life. That was not Jordan Henning. The triggering events. What happened after everybody had left, when everybody thought everything was okay? It caused him to triggered him. In his opening statement, Mr. Carr told you that storm clouds that night before and then the next day, storm clouds were gathering above the Henning home. Completely agree with that. No dispute. But what he failed to tell you is that this storm had been building for years. Years. And based on those triggering events, Jordan lost control, he snapped, he broke. Period. His bucket, as our Dr. Anderson told you, had been filled by the drip, 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 drip. You know, I used this in opening, and we all agreed that was annoying. How about the constant drip, drip, drip? We all agree that Jordan became enraged that night. Totally out of character for him. You don't have to believe me, believe their witnesses. Okay? I think mine are important too. But if you want to disregard all of them, believe theirs. Out of control. Never seen him that way. Totally out of character. Man, he was in another zone. He lost it, and he broke. No one's disputing that. You can see it with your own eyes on that video. He tries to show affection to his wife outside. Don't touch me. the squeezing of the testicles, the physical rejection, and the total emasculation of Jordan Henning. Watts coming over to the house with a gun, or saying he would. Jordan's perception of that. And remember, from the instructions, you've got to determine everything from the viewpoint of Jordan Henning that night. We don't have the luxury of a year and a half coming in later and saying, oh, well, I would have never done that. Right? I could never do that. That wasn't. It's from the viewpoint of Jordan Henning that night at that time. We know that Jimmy Watts had a gun. He said he was going to get it. Jordan believed him. And that's when the gun got introduced into the scenario. Now, I spent a lot of time during the testimony talking about the national training centers, the combat schools. Very strenuous. Jordan had been 9 times in 11 years. What do they teach you at the Army trainings? I call it the combat school. Teach you how to survive. You know, thank goodness I've never been in combat. These soldiers that testified have. They've been at the National Combat Center, and I asked them, I said, well, you know, Sergeant or Command Sergeant Major, when you're in Iraq or Kuwait or anywhere, at home, if the enemy is shooting at you or you perceive a risk, you don't have time to think, oh, I wonder what kind of guy this is. Did he go to church last Sunday? Does he have kids at home? Are they good kids? You don't have time to do that. Boom, boom, boom. It's reflexive. They teach you how to operate on reflex. Reflex alone. That's it. Muscle memory. You know, when I coached back in my day, when I coached Little League baseball or football, you tried to teach the kids muscle memory. Army calls it reflexivity. I don't know if there's any difference. The National Training Center, you're familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
I call it combat school.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're in actual combat,
Mm-hmm.
and there's somebody over there shooting at me, I don't really have time to consider, well, I wonder what kind of guy this is. You know, how many children he has.
For sure.
Do you have time to do that?
No.
And this
No.
is for the reflexive.
Well, yes, so that's where the reflexive comes in. Again, it's training for automaticity or reflexivity, so that you are responding, your body's responding, and you know, again, it's muscle memory. You know, it's like, pulling on more procedural memory versus more declarative memory, where you're doing a procedure, you're doing an overlearned act. And, you know, for example, you know, in weapons training, you learn, you do hours and hours of drills and things like that, so that, so if you have a weapons malfunction, you perform a certain task, you perform sports, right? Which is how you clear a weapons malfunction. And you do it over and over and over again to the point where when something happens, you just kind of go through it and you're not actually thinking about it in a declarative way, in a way that you can describe. You're just kind of procedurally doing it.
Well, that was important. Because Mr. Olszewski, when he was questioning Mr. Henning, he stated that when his gun malfunctioned, Jordan's, he goes off screen, you can hear the click, click. He called it sliding, racking the gun. I think Jordan called it sliding the magazine into the, whatever it's called. And he was in control. He knew exactly what he was doing. Poppycock. That's what that is. He just heard it right there from the doctor, who had not only just a doctor, he's been in the Army, he's been to the training center. They teach you over and over and over and over and over to where it's an automatic reflex that when your weapon jams, you take care of it. And that's what he did. Another sign, ladies and gentlemen, that he was enraged, he had snapped, he was broke, and he lost it. 9 times Jordan Henning's been there, being trained. Being trained, being trained, being trained. Our Dr. Anderson, he told you that, yes, sometimes good people just do bad things. I agree with that. I don't think anybody would disagree with it. But when you're drip, 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 drip for 6 years, your cup overflows. That's what happened that night. There's no doubt about it. That's what Dr. Anderson told you. I want to talk about their Dr. Anderson. The man that came in here yesterday, I think. Now, there are 2 Dr. Andersons in this case. Our Dr. Anderson, who you just saw, and their Dr. Anderson, who you saw yesterday from the stand. The easiest way that I know for you to understand the difference between the Dr. Andersons is this. Our Dr. Anderson reviewed all the evidence, every bit of it. We sent him everything. We made sure he had benefit of everything. Their Dr. Anderson told you, I only spent 1 hour with Jordan and reviewed only selected portions of the case, but everything that the Commonwealth has sent him. Even he agreed that had he been made aware of all the evidence, man, he was in another zone. Jennings, the neighbor. If he had seen it or known about it when he was going to interview Jordan, he would have taken it into consideration. What did he say?
You would have reviewed anything the Commonwealth gave you.
Or the defense, yes. Any evidence that came to me, I would have reviewed it.
Except we didn't know you'd actually interviewed him or done anything till they gave us the report after it all happened.
That's very unfortunate.
They never gave anybody in Jordan's defense the opportunity to be there. And he told you that was unfortunate. Our Dr. Anderson, who saw all the evidence, said there were many triggers that led to this night. He told you that regarding extreme emotional disturbance. And would you explain to the jury what you mean by extreme emotional disturbance?
So extreme emotional disturbance just means that not a mental illness, but just there was something of extreme emotion, rising up that caused some person to be so enraged, inflamed, disturbed that it precluded them from sound judgment, and it impacted their actions in that way.
There, Dr. Anderson, he agreed with us.
It's a temporary state of mind. Would we agree?
I believe so, yes.
All right. A temporary state of mind, and a person becomes so enraged that he acts uncontrollably and that his judgment's overcome. That sounds like extreme emotional disturbance, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right? And the reason it's overcome, it's not from being evil, it's not from a malicious purpose, it's overcome by the disturbance, by the rage. Correct?
I would agree with that.
There's no disagreement between their Dr. Anderson and our Dr. Anderson. That Dr. Anderson, he admits that physical attacks are a triggering event, such as grabbing someone by the testicles.
Physical assault of any kind could be triggering. I think that's obvious.
He did not deny that words can be a triggering event.
You're aware that words can be triggers?
We could open this up to many things. Again, that would be up to the jury to decide that.
He didn't deny it, did he? I mean, as a matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen, this Dr. Anderson, theirs, he reviewed, and he only reviewed, what the Commonwealth of Kentucky wanted him to see. He told you it was unfortunate that we weren't given the opportunity to be there to contribute. We didn't even know, we knew he would be going. No one let us know when he was going to see Jordan. They controlled the evidence. And it's their Dr. Anderson's own words. It's unfortunate that we weren't there. Certainly could have changed his opinion to where he would have agreed that there was a triggering event or events. Dr. Anderson, our Dr. Anderson, the one who reviewed all the evidence, told you there were many triggers that night. The only one he saw on Cameron was, hand me the gun, be a man. Be a man. More emasculation of Jordan Henning by the woman he loved. You know, I've been practicing law here for a long time. Some might say too long. But the rules of court are such, when they give opening statements, they get to go first, we go second. Then, when we give closing arguments, we go first, they go second, and they have a chance to get up here and rebut everything I just told you, if they think they can. I don't have that opportunity. So this is the last chance, the very last chance I have a chance, an opportunity to talk to you on this man's behalf. So what are they going to say? I don't know. But there are certain things that I can anticipate. Because this is not my first rodeo, quite frankly. Jordan was in total control and he was given a countdown on that video. Poppycock. It was all part of that continuing snapping of those triggers. If his marriage was so bad, why didn't he get a divorce? You know, why didn't he just go get a divorce? Well, anytime anyone gets a divorce, it's a major step. It's a hard decision. A lot of people stay together for reasons that have nothing to do with love. Financial reasons. Kids, children. And nobody wants to admit failure. Nobody. Jordan told you why he didn't get a divorce. Riley and Carter and Ashley would make it very hard on him because she outranked him. I don't claim to know a lot about the Army. I probably learned more about the Army in this trial than I've known in the last 10 years. But in the Army, rank means something. It's important. But I'm going to submit to you, the real question is, not why did he get a divorce, why didn't Ashley get one? There was no intimacy in the relationship. Get away from me. Don't touch me. The text message, you saw it. There's nothing, other than those 3 children. It wasn't because he didn't try. Maybe she didn't get a divorce, ladies and gentlemen, because she outranked him. She knew she outranked him. She had the upper hand in the marriage, and she knew it, and she milked it for all it was worth. They're going to tell you, they're going to spend a lot of time, I think, they're going to spend a lot of time telling you that he, Jordan, was in complete control of this situation. And I'm going to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, based on the evidence you've heard in this trial, the testimony you've seen this morning, nothing could be further from the truth. It flies in the face of all evidence from either side. Great guy, never saw him act this way. Soldiers, great guy, had no reason to believe that he had violent tendencies or even ever saw violent outbursts from him. Man, he was in another zone. And I go back to what I said earlier. If he was in such control, I'm just a country boy, okay? I was born and raised right here in Hardin County. If he was in such control, why would he shoot somebody in front of a camera that he installed? Not even the Commonwealth of Kentucky has called him that stupid. Mr. Lasowski says, well, your career was important to you and you didn't want to lose it. Well, I don't know anybody that wants to lose their career. I've been doing this since 1980. Before that, I had another professional degree. And I still, from time to time, engage in that career. Very rarely, because I don't want to lose it. I work too hard to get it. Nobody wants to give up their career. But if he was in control, to that level, what do you think he was doing to his career by committing reckless homicide? Think about that. What did he think he was doing to his career by acting consciously? He wasn't. He wasn't. Now, the judge has told you, you've got several choices here to choose from. You find him not guilty. You find him guilty of murder. But in order to do so, you've got to find that he acted intentionally. with an evil purpose. He didn't do that. His honor has strike that. Mr. Carr told you on Monday, last Monday, 2 Mondays ago, that the penalty for murder was 20 to 50 years. That's what he told you. Manslaughter 1, that's a notch below murder. That's the extreme emotional distress, which I think we've clearly shown. And remember, the burden of proof is on the Commonwealth to show that he was not acting under extreme emotional disturbance. The only evidence they presented that he was not is through their Dr. Anderson, who did not have benefit of all the evidence, who did not allow Jordan Henning to participate in that examination, which he himself said was unfortunate. It's terrible. It's more than unfortunate, it's terrible. Manslaughter 2nd, it's another choice. It's another notch below. But quite frankly, that's for people who are violent, know what they're doing, and they don't care. Now, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that is not an option in this case. Then another notch below murder is reckless homicide. In the instructions, and these can be confusing from time to time, His Honor has instructed you that when somebody acts recklessly with respect to a circumstance or a result, they fail to perceive a substantial risk. And an unjustifiable, they fail to recognize an unjustifiable risk that the result will occur. You've seen the videotape, it's terrible. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Did he perceive anything that night? Did he perceive anything, especially after Jimmy Watts said, "I'm going to get my gun"? Jimmy Watts told you, they were sitting on the steps, arguing, until he and Jordan got into this scuffle. And he said, "I'm going to go get my gun." That's one of the many triggering events in this case. I don't think anybody thinks that this is a intentional act. He's not an evil person. In order to convict him of murder, you've got to find that he's an evil person. And for anyone to think that, honestly, flies in the face of all the evidence you've heard in this case. This is either manslaughter 1, what we're going to submit to you, because he was acting under extreme emotional disturbance, which led to this result, which was triggered by all the things that had festered over the years. The lack of help he didn't even get from his friends, his so-called friends, his drinking buddies, their fair weather friends. Then it triggered. It triggered. That afternoon, that night, and it had to be that night because everybody's testified that when they left the house that night, everything was normal. It was okay. So you got manslaughter 1 or reckless homicide. One thing for sure, it ain't murder. It ain't murder. Jordan Henning is a man who enlisted in voluntarily joined the United States Army. Served his country admirably. And despite all of that, his friends have left him on the battlefield. He snapped. He broke. He lost all control. He became so enraged because of all the triggers we've gone over. That he acted in a temporary state of mind, so enraged, inflamed, and disturbed as to overcome one's judgment. It caused him to act uncontrollably from the impelling force of the extreme emotional disturbance, rather than from evil. That's the instruction, that's the law the judge gave you. Ladies and gentlemen, don't leave Jordan Henning on the battlefield. Don't leave him there. Thank you.